Hi everyone, this is Jim. Welcome to this Blitz chess postmortem. This is a postmortem of my Blitz chess game number 195. I was black here, and my opponent played e4. So I play e5, one of my main replies. Knight f3, knight c6, defending the pawn, and now bishop c4, the Italian game. So I had a whole series of videos on the Italian game in my chess basics. I like to play the move bishop to c5 rather than the two knights defense, but the two knights defense is playable too, of course. And my opponent plays b4, the second choice after c3, and the famous Evans gambit. So I take the pawn, leads to a lot of interesting play. And if you look at the engine evaluation, it actually thinks it's good for black, but this can be a bit misleading. It's a bit tricky to play, and I would not say black is any better in this position. So c3, and you can just retreat the bishop. Bishop d6 is a move that's gained popularity recently. Maybe people found it on their chess engines. But bishop a5 is the old main line. Or bishop back to e7 was another way that was played often. So d4, just challenging the center. Takes. And then now the move queen b3. So queen b3 is a bit of a tricky move. The normal move is castles. But queen b3 says, let's not mess around. Let's get right on with the attack. And now there's an immediate problem on f7. And okay, the engine. I was looking at this earlier with the engine, and it was recommending queen e7. But queen f6 is actually a better move, and you'll see in the database that it's preferred. The queen on e7 is just a target to bishop to a6, bishop a3 rather. So it can be a problem there. So queen to f6, and there's a little bit more flexibility on f6 where it gets kicked around. My opponent castles. And here, probably the kind of safe and sane move to play here is d3. Just stopping his pawn from advancing. And I was a little bit surprised. I guess I was kind of expecting bishop b7. Bishop, what am I saying? Bishop to g5 and queen to g6 is what I was expecting. But he castled, so I should have been ready to play d3 after he castles to stop this pawn. That's a common idea in these openings. But instead I was attracted to this idea, bishop b6, which allows the knight to go to a5 and fork the queen and the bishop, which is also a common defensive idea for black in the Evans gambit. And it's funny enough, the chess engine thinks it's a good idea here. So, but perhaps d3 would have been a little wiser. So he plays e5, and now I was stuck. I was actually wasted quite a bit of time here trying to figure out how to play this. Looks like the queen could go to f5 or to g6. Yeah, I eventually decided that g6 was okay. f5 is this square here. Also, the main idea is you have to just continue to hold on to the f7 pawn, and the tricky part is you have to figure if there's any way that white can dislodge you. But if white plays knight a... Here, we're out of the opening book, so let's put on the notation tab, and I'll show you this as a variation. If white, for example, plays knight to h4, attacking the queen, you just go to h5 and maintain your connection with the pawn. And now he has to defend the knight or move it again. So this is fine. What my opponent played here is knight a3, and I went with my knight a5 idea, although if you look at this, the engine thinks knight g to e7 is the way to play, and I have to say there's a lot to be said for that idea. Instead of chasing after your opponent's pieces with your pieces that are already developed, if it's safe for you to continue developing new pieces, that's the best way to refute a gambit. The hard part is deciding if it's safe, because if you're not making an active move attacking his pieces, then he has a lot of flexibility. So before making a move like knight g to e7, you have to be sure that he doesn't have some tactical blow that will just destroy you. Or you can memorize it. If you've got a chess engine and an opening book, you can just remember in this position it's safe to play knight g to e7, and then you can just smash out the move. But you don't have an unlimited amount of memory space, so you got to make these decisions. So I played knight a5 here, hitting the queen, and now the queen went to a4. And once again, it doesn't like my idea. I wanted to just get rid of the bishop right away. It's recommending d takes c4, just grabbing a pawn, which I can't advise, even if it's technically good. You know, I think white gets a lot of compensation for that. So that's definitely a risky way to play. Knight e7, though, here is maybe a good idea, because the knight has already interrupted this battery. So there's no longer this huge pressure on f7, and I don't have to take that knight off. I could just develop my pieces, and probably am better off doing that. But anyway, I take the bishop, and he takes back. It brings his pieces forward, so yeah, that sort of helped him out. And now white, from being slightly worse, is now slightly better. So that's how easy it is to slip up and get into a bad position in the Evans Gambit. I mean, basically, white is just really active here, and so there's a lot of compensation on a lot of ways for black to go wrong. Okay, knight e7 here, and he played c takes d4, recouping one of his pawns. He's still a pawn down. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. Yeah, 6 pawns to 7. But he has a lot of compensation here, and he's better than even. So I castle, but the game continues. You know, it's not all over just because he has compensation. Bishop b2, and I went d6, undermining the center here. And this is a big mistake. You see, the engine notices this right away. So at this point, I get into trouble. I was playing okay up until this point, but I was really worried about knight takes bishop here. I can't take back with the a pawn because there's a pin on this rook, and so I'm thinking, well, how am I ever going to unpin? And well, I can take back with the c pawn in this position, but only. But that messes up my pawns, and it leaves me with this isolated backwards d pawn, so it's not very pleasant. So anyway, I'm thinking of moving the d pawn out of the way and getting the bishop out of the way, and then the rooks defend each other, and this pawn, the a pawn, is unpinned. So that's how I'm trying to solve my problem. But what's wrong with this idea is that it just takes too many steps, and because I got to move the pawn out of the way, and I got to move the bishop out of the way, so it takes 2 moves, and white can strike right away because d6 interrupts the defense of the bishop. The bishop was also being defended by the queen, but with this pawn in the way, and then when he takes, I took back with the pawn here, and so this bishop is basically undefended. It says I should just give up on these pawns and play knight to c6, so that's the way to survive. So here it just loses a piece because he can just snap off that bishop. The pin is on, and I haven't had time to play my move, bishop out to defend the rook. So I'm really lost here, but I throw in the move bishop to g4, which at least is a try. I'm actually threatening to win a piece here because I can just take that. After bishop takes knight, there's a pin on the g-pawn, and so he can't take back. So I am threatening just to win a piece here. But he can probably... Oh, look at this. He can't actually take the rook. I was thinking he could just take the rook here, but let's see what happens. Knight takes rook. Ah, I get it. It's because bishop takes f3 not only wins a piece, but it also threatens checkmate. So he has to play g3, and then I can get the knight back. And so what's the material now? It's a rook and 2 pieces for 2 rooks and 1 piece. So I'm down the exchange, but I have a pawn, and I have a good position. So not too shabby. So that would have almost worked. That almost worked, except he has the move knight h4. He can move the knight with a tempo against my queen. And he found that move in the game. He played it. And now I play queen h5, attacking the knight, just trying to get some material in exchange. But now he can just grab the rook and be a whole rook up. So I'm just busted at this point. I guess it all stemmed from this move d6, which was a bit of a panic reaction. When I played d6, I was worried about how am I ever going to develop this bishop. It's all trapped in. And so I played this move without sufficient consideration. And I wanted to mention here, the reason I backed up is that the engine had a really good move for me here, which is the move knight to d5. So I just acknowledge that I can't get the bishop out of the way. I'm going to have it's going to be stuck here for a little bit. But this is a great square for the knight, what's interesting about this is it's really hard to dislodge from this square. There's no pawns that can chase it away. The bishop is the wrong color to chase it away, and white could try and chase it away with a move like queen b5, but then I have the move knight f4 with threats against white's king. So it's a very interesting move, and it defends the bishop here. So now I can play a move like d3, liberating my bishop, and without risking liberating my light squared bishop without risking the bishop on b6. So anyway, this is a good example of where a little bit of calculation would have saved me here. I should recognize that d6 is not safe and look around for an alternative, and then maybe I would discover this knight d5 idea. Okay, but I didn't, and the game continued as I explained earlier with this threat, and then knight h4 he played, and I played queen h5. And now my opponent's it's his turn to make a mistake now. He just defended his knight. I think he was imagining that this pawn was still pinned, because the pawn had been pinned for several moves there. But the pin is no longer operating because the rooks are protected. So I can just grab his knight, and now I'm ahead again because I'm once again a pawn up. So I thought that was a pretty interesting transaction there. He goes queen b3, and I play knight g6. I was trying to make it work with just the queen and the bishop, but there just wasn't enough material here to, with the knight and the queen covering this f3 square. There wasn't enough material to get a good attack going, so I need to bring another piece in. He takes, I take, and then he played queen takes b6, grabbing this pawn. And I was okay with that. I figured I would play this move bishop f3. Oh yeah, and the engine is starting to like my position a lot here. So let's back up and see where that happened. Right here, yeah, so queen takes b6 is a mistake here. He needs to attend to the threats around his king. And what's interesting about this position is that there's a lot of material on the board. There's two rooks and a queen for each side, and the bishops are of opposite colors, which means that if white can launch an attack on the dark squares using his bishop, I'm one less piece. I have one less piece to fight him with because I don't have a bishop that can oppose him on the dark squares, and the knights are already off. So it's basically like white is attacking with a piece up. But the converse is true as well. If I can get an attack going on the light squares, then it's like I'm a piece up because this bishop is useless in defending those light squares. So when you have the situation, middle game position, bishops of opposite color, you definitely want to get on the attack. The initiative is always at a premium in chess, but even more so in a situation like this. So I'm looking for those attacking moves, just a good position for the bishop here on f3 and threatening queen to h3 to g2 mate. So he plays h4 to hold it off, and then I go queen to g4 to try and get in on the light squares this way. So my opponent plays queen b3, defending, and it's a good defense because it's hitting the bishop, and so I can't play over here. It slows me down. I have to come up with another idea, and eventually I try the move rook a to c8. Rook a5 is suggested. Rook a5 is kind of interesting. You can place your rook on a5. That's this square here. You can place the rook on that square, and the queen can't take it because you have this queen h3 to g2 mate idea, and they can't be stopped if the queen leaves leaves off its attack on the bishop. Okay, I played rook a to c8. He goes rook fe1. Yeah, and I'm keeping some advantage along here, but not much. So my attack is kind of stalled. But I'm just trying to get my pieces out and make them work for me. So he chases my bishop away and shuts down this diagonal. So I shift over to another diagonal, which is this is a nice diagonal too because it supports the queen going into h3, and he really can't stop it. So he just moved his king away, which is also an engine recommendation there. And now I can get my rook on the second rank. And now I start to think of ideas like a rook sacrifice here. So the engine thinks white should just play rook to f1 right away, put an end to some of these ideas. But he plays rook a to e8, going rook a to e1, going on the attack instead of going on the defense. And it's still probably a position he should be able to hold. I play queen h3, and then he plays bishop a3. And I'm still thinking of this idea. You know, if rook takes pawn, king takes, queen to h2 check. And the problem is the king can escape to the square f3. If it goes to f1, then bishop to h3 is checkmate. So I have a tactic here that almost works, but not quite. And I play the move bishop g4 to cover this square. And now I have a working tactic, which if my opponent doesn't notice, will win the game. And that's what happened here. He played bishop to d6, and you see the engine, a little red light goes off there in a fraction of a second. The engine spots it immediately, but you know, for a human player, I think it takes a while. Maybe. Well, it depends on what level you're at, of course. Probably the Hikaru Nakamuras and the Magnus Carlsens of the world would also see that instantly. But for us regular players, you can find tactics like this, and I think I kind of described the process here. The first thing is, whenever there's a pawn near the king position, which is only defended by the king, you always look for a piece sacrifice there, because your opponent is going to have to take back with the king, and that may leave it in an awkward position where you have some follow-up attack. So you always notice those situations and spend at least a little bit of time. You know, how much time depends on your clock situation and the speed of the game, but spend a little bit of time calculating whether that sacrifice works. And then if it doesn't work, search for a way to make it work. So that was the idea. Bishop g4, make that sacrifice work. So he played bishop takes d6, and now I play rook takes f2. And he really has to do something drastic here, because there's a threat of queen to h2 checkmate. And but if he takes the rook with his king, then queen to h2, king to f1, bishop to h3 is also checkmate. So he plays the only move that keeps him in the game, which is rook e8 check. And now, of course, you have to be extra careful. If I play the wrong move, rook takes e8 here, then white is winning, because I'm just down material. And when he moved his rook away, he gave his king an escape route. So I have to keep his rook in place. So if I trade, that's a problem. I trade, he comes back and checks me, and my king moves, and now he can grab my rook, and he has you know, a free reign over here. So I'm going to need my rook. I'm going to need to keep his rook here to block the king's escape. So the only move to maintain the win here is king to h7. And now, what did he play? He played king takes f2. Yeah, it doesn't really matter. He could give up the rook first. Rook h8. Okay. But anyway, king takes f2 is the more human move. And then queen h2 check. So the idea here is that, once again, the king can't go to f1 because of mate with bishop h3. So, and he can't go to f3 anymore, so he's forced to go onto the file. In fact, that's the only move, king e3, that interrupts the defense of this rook. And now I can grab this rook with check. And so now I'm just winning materially. And his king is still in big trouble. So that's about how far ahead you had to be able to calculate. Just notice that there was no escape for the king. But actually, king d4, yeah, anywhere he goes, there's sufficient mating threats that he's going to have to sacrifice even more material to survive. He played king f4, and now there's a mate in 3, starting with queen to f2 check. Okay, I was starting to move quickly, so I didn't notice that one. I played the move rook takes e1, just grabbing my material while I can, and then he takes the bishop, and now I'm up the exchange, so I'm up material, but there's also still a mating tack. So queen e2 check. I found this one, king g5, and now the simple mate, which I eventually figured out would have been, this was not played in the game. My opponent resigned here. You know, I was thinking about queen to h3 check, but then the king starts wandering back this way. But if you play the move f6 check, queen to h5 check, king here is the only move, and then queen e4 check. Yeah, that's what I was saying. The rook supports the queen here, and the king has no escape. So he's getting mated that way. If we go back, the engine says queen h5 check is mating too. That was my first instinct, but I wasn't sure. So king can't come here, so he has to go to this square once again. And now queen to f5 check is mating. Okay, because the rook is blocking this column, and over here he's got a pawn in the way. So mate either way. Anyway, a very interesting game. I really like the tactic at the end. Hope you guys enjoyed that. Leave any comments. you have in the section below, and I'll see you again later. Bye.